Welcome to the Mike and Doug Show with Tyla in the background. Today we're going to talk about the fact that nobody is at the helm of the globalist ship that is running aground. And everywhere you look, all you see are subsets of the Pilgrim Society with their interlocked directorships of organizations now that are desperate to become the controlling mechanism of world economics through economic predatorism. So, welcome to the show, Mike. And I know
Hi,
you have a
Douglas.
lot to say about this. So, what do you have to say about who's at the
Well,
helm?
this is going to be a free for all because I have no notes.
That's all the better. We want to see the raw Michael McKibben, okay? So just spit it out. Here, I'll start spitting.
Okay, so you say there's nobody in charge. I don't know if that's true or not, but it doesn't appear there are. And practically speaking, it makes sense that nobody can be. There can't be one person other than the demon Mammon in charge of this. So if you're talking about a person, you're probably right. It seems to me we're talking about a high ranking demon in charge of this.
No doubt. And we can name that demon as the United Nations to one degree, but then the United Nations is simply the League of Nations reformed, which is simply the Pilgrim Society reformed. And so the
That's right.
Pilgrims are still, the City of London is still behind our stock market because we've demonstrated that the International Continental Exchange, which controls the New York Stock Exchange, the Chicago Commodities Exchange, the New York Commodities Exchange, all of our free market is controlled in the City of London. But what is really upsetting me is that
By
they
Reuters, therefore the Rothschilds.
precisely, and we can even name who is in control of that. Matter of fact, it's Michael Farmer, isn't it? Who at one point was in charge of ICE, and of course, who is he? He's a baron, and he is certainly a member of the, I would assume, the Privy Council, and he's the insider for the Rothschilds. He was their agent for a long time, and now
Right.
for a minute they tried to obfuscate it by sending it up to some ballyhoo up there in Sweden, because I always say, don't forget the Vikings in all of this. Don't forget the Lombards. Don't forget the Rus. Don't forget the invaders of Europe who became the monarchs of Europe. And so when we're looking at this, it just ticks me off. But the good news, we got good news today. The good news is the World Economic Forum is fighting with the United Nations. And that's the reason that out of the United Nations, there are a number of groups now that have formed and are trying to be independent of the United Nations because the United Nations allows a bunch of nations to give their opinion. They seldom ever do anything. Matter of fact, I don't know anything good they've ever done. But when it comes down to it, the World Economic Forum is simply a branch of the United Nations, as far as I'm concerned. But in the World Economic Forum, we have nothing but billionaires out for their own self interest, their own self aggrandizement. So they're fighting with each other. Look at the last meeting they had. They couldn't come to any conclusions, and their narratives are being busted left and right because they have a fascist Nazi running it who dresses like he's Darth Vader. And
And
it's
that's pretty new information. I mean, before he showed up on the scene, nobody knew who he was and they didn't know what his background was. And our research was some of the early work that discovered his Nazi past and that of his father and his nuclear Nazi past. So we're talking about nuclear weapons. We're talking about shipping. We're talking about Klaus Schwab is set to make many fortunes out of this coming collapse that he's trying to orchestrate. I'll give you one little practical example. My wife and I went to a memorial service for a friend, one of her relatives or cousins, and we went down to Cincinnati. And as we're driving down to Cincinnati, we see this massive manufacturing plant that used to be called U.S. Robotics. It's now called Festo. And if you know anything about Klaus Schwab, you know his wife is from the Festo family. And now they've set up this foreign embassy down in Cincinnati to build robotics. So they're all about this techno future that they've planned for us, and they're going to make
problem
money
is,
off of it.
yeah, problem is these elites don't talk to any of us common people. None of us want that. We will resist it with our lives. We will not go towards being transhumanists. And like Elon Musk recently said, oh no, don't worry about those 1,500 animals I killed in my testing. The chip for your brain that's going to connect you to the internet is all ready to go now. And he just sped it up by months. And just, I think it was yesterday, he said, no, 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 it's cool. We're ready to start putting them in humans. But he doesn't have one in his head.
Isn't that fascinating how confused this Elon Musk emergence has made the alt right? Some are for him, some are against him, some are not sure, and they're all trying to believe. They want to believe that Twitter, that his takeover of Twitter is going to be a good thing. But how is that possible? How can you, in the one side of your mouth, talk about Twitter and free speech, and on the other side, talk about putting a chip in people's brains in order to probably take over their free speech? I mean, it's just illogical. And the logic, I think they've attacked logic, because you hear some people that you used to believe were fairly logical and could see through these things. They're believing two sides of a lie.
Maybe they're deliberately trying to implode Twitter to cover up the fact that they are parked on stolen technology.
Well, that is definitely one thing. And I think they're also creating a honeypot because they want to get the rest of the conservatives inside a global system like Twitter or Facebook in order to make this implementation of this cyborg future possible. They can't do it unless we're hooked up.
So true. And it is an attack on logic. It is an attack on truth. As you said, logic is no longer has any control in our modern world. And as a matter of fact, if you read the news, assume it's the exact opposite. That's what everyone now says. No one believes the news anymore. I mean, look at all the people who've dropped off of CNN and no one watches it. We have people on the internet who get more hits than the CNN gets followers. So the deal is with Twitter, everything Elon Musk has done has always been fake. He hasn't invented anything. He's not smart. He's an idiot. You can tell by listening to him speak. You can tell by his actions.
Well, most people don't realize where he got his money. Besides coming from a wealthy South African family, all of his early big dollars came from Obama. Obama gave him billions in energy stimulus. Well, you can do a lot of damage with $1 billion or more dollars. And so then he went on to Tesla. Then he went on to SpaceX, and he was given billions of dollars of taxpayer money. And now they're trying to paint him in the mainstream media as this boy genius. I mean, haven't we learned our lesson yet? Stop believing these fictions about these celebrities. What is it about chasing celebrities that's got people so drugged up?
Because they're idols. They're the new golden calf. If we believe in the Silicon Valley wonder children, Elon Musk and Mark Zuckerberg and all these silly people who have invented nothing, these are DARPA stooges who are simply front guys, and they are as fake can be. For instance, he took over Twitter. Look at the way he did it. He should be put in jail for what he's done. Look at what he's done with this release of information about the elections, which was going to absolutely show the manipulation of our elections in America. No, it's all been released and there's nothing there actionable. So it's all fake. But that's what we're living in. We're living in this complete fake science time. And all you have to do is claim that you're a scientist and then no one can disbelieve you. But look at what is driving most of these subsets of the Pilgrim Society. Environmental change, climate change. Notice it was, first off, we were all going to freeze to death. And then we're all going to be overheated and the oceans are going to rise. Now, the Antarctic has the coldest winter in history and more snow than they've ever had in history. Doesn't go too much with climate warming. So then, therefore, they call it climate change. The climate change has been manipulated since the 60s when we've been seeding clouds with coal ash, and now we seed it with all kinds of nanoparticles, heavy metal nanoparticles. For what?
I'm looking outside today.
Yeah, for
the
200-year agenda of wiping out humanity, depopulation. That's the goal. And when you realize that, then you can begin to make some sense of it. For instance, Why is the Pope part of the Council for Inclusive Capitalism? Why did he call back all the money to the Vatican? Because he wants to be part and doesn't want to be basically kicked out of the club because of the ESG requirements now, the environmental social governance requirements for all major corporations, which basically is nothing more than saying you are complicit with the lies of carbon credit, which will be the new tax, it will be the new currency. And so here's the Pope, who should have nothing to do with economics, showing that what I'm saying is true. They're all fighting with each other to try to get a bigger piece of the pie, because they know that the sun is about to micronova, and that's the reason they came up with the myth of 11 years until climate change wipes out the earth. No, that's until the sun completely goes through either a major solar flare, because we're in a Maunder minimum, or that the sun goes through a mini nova.
Before you move off the ESG, so let's take this at the citizen level. You have a pension or a 401k and you're investing in these companies. And these companies now have to comply with ESG in order to be a part of the club. Well, what that really translates to mean is that the money that you've got in that account, it's okay now that it is used for social programming and it is not there to bring you a financial benefit. So they've basically stolen your money to use it for their social agenda. And this is very similar with the banks, because when you invest in the bank, you don't have deposits anymore with Dodd-Frank. If their derivatives are called and they're short, they can come in and take your money away. So you see how they've taken our wealth away and we weren't even aware of it?
The ESG is the doctrine and dogma for the Net Zero Alliance. Okay. So if you say you're with ESG, it doesn't actually admit then that you're part of the Net Zero Alliance, which all these major corporations are. And what is that? There's the Net Zero Alliance for banking, the Net Zero Alliance for owners. And what are they saying? They're saying that they believe in this climate change complete nonsense. 40% of the world's bank assets are controlled by Net Zero Alliance. If we have net zero carbon emissions, the world will end, not because of climate change, because of utter stupidity that we have wiped out internal combustion
What are we going to
engines.
do? Get rid of plants?
Get rid of
this
everything.
is just
Planes,
so stupid.
planes,
It
cars.
just drives me nuts as an engineer. Why anybody would put any stock in something related to carbon? These, I guess it's because science is real, Douglas.
Or how about this? If you're saying that what entity is really behind this is a demon, then you have to
Yes.
look at something that's beyond our normal sight and capacity. It is beyond what a human being is. So why would this entity, Douglas, want to do away with carbon? Is carbon like a kryptonite to this demon?
Carbon is invisible. It can't, it was the one factor that they could take and stretch into fake science to the point that they could say that our carbon emissions are creating climate change. That's complete nonsense. Even if you took the carbon dioxide being created in the earth right now by humans, multiply that times 100, it would simply be sucked up into the earth. There's no such thing as having too much carbon dioxide or too much carbon.
Yeah, I get
Insane.
that. But let's look at this. If we're going to defeat a demon, we have to operate at a higher level than the demon. So we can't operate from this earth place. We have to get up over that demon. So why is the push for lack of carbon? Is it because carbon is life and they want to extinguish life? Because if you get rid of all carbon, you get rid of all life. Is that what the demon, this synagogue of Satan, is really all about? The antithesis of life?
I never thought of that. All biological life is based on carbon. And if they wish to eradicate carbon, they wish to eradicate human life, biological life. So yes, that's a good point. Now, the Net Zero Alliance says zero carbon on the earth created by humans, which is impossible by 2050, which the United Nations, remember, the Net Zero Alliance comes out of the United Nations Environment Program Finance Initiative. Okay. So what I'm saying is, the UN creates these great ideas, right? And then the corporations and the Pilgrim Society members get a hold of this, like the World Economic Forum, and they turn it into sheer insanity where they can make the money. Now, why would they say that basically the demarcation, the line in the sand is 2030 or 2050? Because the mini nova of the sun is supposed to happen between 2030 and 2040, 2050 at the outset. That's what they're not telling anybody. The real science, notice that in all of climate science, for climate change, they never once mentioned the sun. The number one factor, the only factor driving anything with climate is the sun, and they ignore the sun completely. So this is the UN 2030 Sustainability Development Agenda on steroids, so that the World Economic Forum billionaires, the 2,000 billionaires who are basically, these are interlocked directorships between all of these groups, and the World Economic Forum is the worst cabal on the face of the earth. Anyone who's a member of it should not be allowed to participate in US economics. That's my opinion. That would solve the whole problem. In other words, the Pilgrim Society would be locked out, the Crown Agents would be locked out, the World Economic Forum global leaders would be locked out, or as I call them, the shapeshifters, not the world shifters. Not the reset needs to be reset to get rid of these people. And all you'd have to do, literally overnight, stop all offshore banking, freeze those funds and don't allow them back into any country, period. And that would end all of this overnight. But we have other groups too, like the COP27 or the Branson, the Virgin Airlines, what's his name? Branson. He's got the B group. All of these groups all sell out, including the World Food Council, to ESG, which is nothing more than saying we believe the fake science of climate change. That is, it's got to be thrown out. Anyone who would actually believe that is probably one of the people who they're signing up. They're putting their name on the list to be eradicated.
Well, I don't know a single engineer who believes any of that crap. Not a single one. Because we know, we know the physics of what they're saying, and it's stupid. But the average person in the street who must have flunked out on their science course is ready to believe this stuff and is willing to make decisions in their lives based on this underlying lie. And that really gets to the point that we have been hammering home about this demon, that once you start layering your society and making your decisions based on lies that were founded on lies that are founded on lies. I was being interviewed by John B. Wells the other day, and he quoted John Lennon about his comment on karma, that karma's going to get you. And that's, I think that's indicative of what we're talking about here, that these lies are so layered now that we are just making decisions that will move us into oblivion if we don't stop it.
So let's look at the shape of the demon, because we clearly need to see what this is. And the word corporate is body. And then the way they set corporations up legally is that these become bodies that have that are governed by laws, but they're not people, they're not humans, but yet they can have many of the same rights as a human. But then what this demon has done over time, over 4,000 years, has brought these corporations together into a bigger body. And how the demon did it was through the interlocking directorships. So you might see ESG as the fuel, so to speak, or the blood of the demon that is bigger than a corporation. It's interlocked, it's worldwide. And so the solution has to be, first, we have to see the demon for what it is. Oh, and the demon requires blood sacrifice. It's always required that. And the blood sacrifice became the sacrifice of your life through debt slavery. I know, Mike, you could just talk about this on and on. But how do you destroy, how do we take out that demon? Because we've always been about the target. And this is why I think it's having an understanding that all these corporations must fall away. Civilization will collapse the way we know it. And it's going to be a good thing. There's no other way to take out this demon.
Yeah, the banking system is evil. There's no question that we've proven how it's evil. So the fact that we are relying on an evil system to do good things, it won't happen. It's illogical. And I think we've all, as Christians, believe that people can change, they can repent, they can turn around and stop doing evil. But the problem is we're relying on an essentially evil system in its essence, in its um, in its creation. It was evil and is still evil. And yet here we have humanity for 4,000 years has continued to feed this beast. And yet we're now it's more obvious now that we are being attacked by an entity. And so therefore, you know, I'm talking to you, Douglas, an exorcist, somebody who has actually been up close to many of these demons, these types of demons. And I would defer to you in terms of in identifying the demon. What do we do? What do we do with that recognition?
If they hadn't taken complete control, we could identify the individuals, tell the truth about them, call them out, and demand that the demon leave them. But of course, you can't exorcise someone who doesn't want to be exorcised. And these people do
I
not
think
want to
that's
be
a key
exorcised.
point.
They
I
don't want
think
to be
that's a key
exorcised.
point. It won't happen. That
No.
won't happen, right?
No. And if you look at the United Nations Sustainability Development Agenda for 2030, that isn't sustainable for the earth. That's sustainable for the corporations, the international corporations, the globalists. That's all it is. It's a very, very, very clear plan. But who created the United Nations? Same people who created the League of Nations, same people who created the Pilgrim
The
Society.
British Pilgrim Society.
And right now, who is the leader of the of climate change agenda? That would be King Charles, the Fat Fingers, or Sausage Fingers, as they like to call him, or as I like to call him, King Upchuck, because he is a pathetic creature who has always been retarded. He was like George Bush, baby Bush, who was literally in special education for most of his life. And then we elect him as the president. Why? Because he's simply reading what he's told to read. He doesn't even understand it.
What do you mean we elect him as president?
We elected George baby Bush.
You're talking about, I thought you were talking about Prince Charles.
We
No, I'm
don't
talking about-
elect anybody to any office. At the Pilgrim
Correct.
Society, and Mark Malloch Brown and his gang don't pre-approve as a selection.
Right.
That's correct. Let's look at the recent election. We are seeing a battle for the House. We're seeing a battle for the Senate. Down to one individual will determine who has the majority. And whoever has the majority sets the agenda, and they basically control. So now we're seeing an Arizona senator, the senior senator from Arizona, changing from a Democrat to a Republican. Why? There's an antitrust suit against Vanguard and everyone involved in Net Zero Alliance and who are supporting ESG. It's an antitrust suit. So you've got to see some of the rats, the demon rats, as I like to call them, or the Democrat rats, that they're jumping ship because they can see what's going on. Well, it was 20 years ago that the Bilderberger Society had a journalist infiltrate them and recorded what they had to say. And remember, they use Chatham House rules, so they don't write things down, and you're not supposed to talk about anything that's said there. You're just supposed to get the insider trading information to go out and be one of the insiders and know where the next investment is going to gain you economic predatory advantage. And so what we're really seeing here is that you can't stop these organizations that are so ensconced, because basically, look at the people who believe the mainstream media. Look at the numbers of people who got the medicine in the arm. That tells you what we're dealing with. And we've said it all along. 1/3 of humanity will be the remnant after the collapse of not only Western civilization, but if there's a mini nova, which all the scientists who are doing any research will tell you they now believe in mini novas. They now have been able to target 3 or 4 times it has happened.
Okay, can we stop you now? What's a mini nova?
It's when too much, basically, it's dust. It's dust that gets accumulated in the process of the fusion reaction going on the surface of the sun. And when it gets too clustered by that, it actually will accumulate, pull in, because that's what the sun's doing. It's pulling everything in and then transforms it through fusion and then sends it out. Well, as they're pulling it in, cosmic dust comes in. So there's so much cosmic dust now accumulated that once it gets pulled closer, it will simply create an explosion on the sun. The sun will blink out for 3 days, which everyone knows that's what the letters of Fatima, the secret letters of Fatima talked about. That's what you hear all the time. There'll be 3 days of darkness. Well, that will be the warning to the fact that then there will be a mini nova. How do we know they're mini novas? Because if you look back towards the center of our galaxy, all the stars on the path, our path to the supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, those stars have gone through multiple mini novas. And now they have, the Carrington event and many other events that they've demonstrated that this has happened on the Earth. And unfortunately, only a remnant is left. Well, the elites want to be that remnant.
Remnant of what? Oh, remnant of the people?
Of humanity. So it's
Okay.
worse than a culling. This is a massive disaster that happens on a periodic level because the Earth is not overpopulated, by the way, with even 8 billion people, because you can take all the desert land in the world and turn it into gardens. We have all the technology.
Well, let me throw another idea out there. Just take a drive across the United States. Look how much open land there is. I mean, what we're talking about are people who lived in cities their whole lives, and they believe this lie that, oh my gosh, they're building a grocery store on former farmland. We're running out of farmland. It's such a myopic view, but that's what these propagandists pick up on. They pick up on those naive ideas, and then you just pump the ones that will give them the message they're looking for, and then the person's already predisposed to believe it. And then you can't chip away that understanding with an ice pick.
What are we going to do to try to change a system that would allow AOC to put forth the Green New Deal, a bartender who was trained by a young Turk, what's his name, Yink Uyghur? So she is nothing more than a plant. And then you have the Senate and the House voting for the Green New Deal. So there'll be no more airplanes. There'll be no more internal combustion engines. There'll be no more buildings with windows. Solar and wind power are the worst for environmental waste. You
Okay, I'm
can't
going to
even
preach
recycle
again.
them.
I'm going to preach again. We've got to get rid of all these politicians, lawyers, and accountants and attorneys, and we've got to put engineers in charge of the legislature and the Senate.
I totally agree.
Civil engineers, especially.
Yes, because these are uncivil, uneducated imbeciles who are running as permanent politicians.
They've never done a bit of work in their lives. They don't know anything about the science that they're talking about in general. And they're not about problem solving. They're about creating problems because that's business for themselves, and that's new revenue.
Now, my face is frozen, so here's my profile from 20 years ago. Look, Mike, we do need engineers, but as you full well know, sometimes the building is unsalvageable. So we have to have a demolition, and we want people out there to be prepared for the demolition and that it's an okay thing. Then we got to call all you engineers in to come and fix it.
Well, engineers are involved in demolition as well. So that's usually the first step.
I know. You're our head torpedo, aren't you?
That's what it was called the other day.
Washington, D.C., the District of Crime, is nothing more than an extension of the Crown agents in America.
Right.
America is not controlled by Americans. And anyone
okay, so can you stop? I'm sure a lot of people are hearing this for the first time. They don't know what Crown agents are and probably don't believe it. Well, Crown agents. Go ahead and explain what Crown agents
believe
are.
It, folks. The Serco is a Crown agent. Most of the money for international development goes through the Brits or their British agents in America. Basically, what they call the shadow government or the deep state is simply the British controlled transnationalist globalists in America. And unfortunately, almost every single person on Capitol Hill has sold out to them because that's where they get their money. And they certainly don't get reelected because who controls our elections? A Brit, Mark Malloch Brown, a member of the Privy Council, one of the most evil men on the face of the earth. And yet he got no trouble whatsoever when it was found out that it was his company that was part of the fraud. And then look at the way that it was handled by Washington, D.C. They sweep the evil immediately under the rug. They call in the biggest federal agencies, the Department of Justice, the CIA, the FBI, the British created CIA, I should point that out. as well as the executive branch, which is nothing more than a Hollywood Disney World production. That's who we get as a president now, whoever they can sell through Hollywood. And that's the reason Hollywood is so anxious to always support this insanity. If anybody voted for these things, they should be impeached because of their stupidity. Okay? It's very simple. They have nothing to back it up. And when they say they have settled science, that is completely insane. Let's just take one simple, tiny example. The United Nations controlled us in the last 2.5, 3 years through the World Health Organization. And it's ran by a communist who is noted to be someone who has caused the death of many people in his own country. And he is sold out to the pharmaceutical companies.
That's that smarmy little guy with the mustache, right?
Tedros, yeah.
Tedros, yeah.
Whose last name I don't even wish to attempt to pronounce. But he is the friend of China. Okay, first off, China's bankrupt. The reason we should watch China is because what is happening in China has demonstrated that the reason there was a big lockdown, it was to stop people from going to the bank and having more runs on Chinese banks, because the Chinese banks have attempted to mimic our supposed free market fractional banking, and they got themselves in so much trouble that when they had so many floods, and they had, of course, tariff problems and so on and so forth, they basically are bankrupt. And they're even discussing, as I said about 2 years ago, that President Xi will be overthrown in 5 years. That's a guarantee. Mark my words. Now, who created that? That was Silicon Valley with their Dragonfly, their social credit system. And it's all about banks, folks. It's about banks. And even the pharmaceutical companies are all about banks. And it's about decreasing population so that the elite do not have so many people in competition for resources. And remember, you cannot satiate greed or any of the other 7 deadly sins. So these people cannot be stopped. But let's just take one example.
All right, let me stop you there on the resources, because one of the things that came up in our research about Klaus Schwab is his connection with Mark Rich and his family's connection with Mark Rich. Now, for those of us who remember from the 90s, Clinton in 2001, when he left office, the day before he left office, he did 2 things. One, he pardoned Mark Rich, and then he appointed our patent attorney, James P. Chandler, and Bill Gates to the National Infrastructure Assurance Council. And those were his last acts. And Mark Rich, if you look up Mark Rich, you'll see his history with a shipping company called Glencore, which they say has more ships on the high seas than the British Admiralty. And Clinton had to pardon him because Rich, who is a Swiss, had gotten so upside down in some of the corruption that he was running. But the main thing there is, in terms of the history of shipping and the history of commodities, is Rich was controlling more of our international trade through his shipping company than probably anybody in the world. And so that was why they had to get him out of jail. Well, actually, he was in exile in Switzerland. Clinton pardoned him so that he could carry on his corruption. But that was exactly the time when Chandler was stealing our social networking invention. So these criminals in banking have to control communication. They have to control shipping. They have to control the issuance of credit. Otherwise, they can't make their system work. And that is the discovery that we made about these ancient Babylonian Radhanites, that those were the exact same tasks that they had been controlling for the last 4,000 years.
And the White House is the seat of that. Obama, when he came in, who is not a U.S. citizen, that's not his name. And those aren't his parents that he claimed were his.
Okay, who is it? What is his name?
Oh, his name is Sambarka, and he was born in Sumatra. And he was the son of the head of that very, very strange CIA-sponsored religion, which I can't think of the name of, but we put up his picture. Subud.
Yeah.
Subud is very much like the Moonies. The Moonies controlled the United Press International. People don't know that. That's how he came to power. He controlled the news. 1/3 of the news was controlled by the guy who was the head of the Sun Myung Moon. And so essentially, you hide behind religious protection in many cases. But let's look at what Obama did. The United Nations should be eradicated from America. We should pull out all support from it, and we should consider them international terrorists, because that's the only thing I've ever seen them do is terrorism, economic and otherwise. They're blue hats. They've never protected anybody. As a matter of fact, they have the worst rate of rape than any other army in the world, including fundamentalists that we know of who are terrorists. Okay, so literally the United Nations are terrorists. So during Obama's time, there was the Agenda 2030. He signed it, but the Congress never approved it. Therefore, it shouldn't even be in play. It shouldn't even be talked about. We should basically completely wipe it out of existence. But no, they're the group that are creating all these other subgroups. Or we had the Small Arms Treaty. He signed it. The Congress never approved it. But still, they're trying to take guns to this very day. And the fake Biden keeps, every time that there's a false flag created by the FBI. Remember, the FBI has been involved in over 75% of every single mass shooting. They had previously arrested 75% of the people who are these murderers, and obviously brainwashed them and gave them the trigger word when the time was ready for the false flag to be sprung.
Well, we know for a fact that the FBI was created out of players from Columbia University who were the leaders of the Pilgrim Society. That is a fact. Yeah. And that was created long before the CIA and the NSA. And so it's been nothing but a law enforcement extension of this British hegemony over America.
And we see that when Obama signed this Strong Cities Initiative, which was another treaty that was to allow UN troops to come into America, which they did. And we got to see lots of UN armor and movement around the country until every single city has a UN military division. And we saw that they were training UN troops down in Florida. Congress never approved that. And so now we have Biden. And what's he approving? He just approved something. We did an intelligence report on this the second that it came out. His executive order set him up for this, but now he wants to sign the World Health Assembly International Health Regulation changes. And those changes will make it that everyone will have to have an ID, which will, on the ID, will be how many medicines in your arm you've taken and who you are, and that will be connected to the social credit system, so all banks. And so now we see that everyone's all worried about the World Health Assembly because Biden has signed this agreement. And in the agreement at the G20, he also signed an agreement that said that we will go, all Americans will either be chipped or they will have an ID card that will tell whoever it is that scans it everything about you. And this is your dark profile, as you call it. And it is what will control you. It's what controls the Chinese now. And people didn't believe me when I was telling them from the beginning what was going to happen to the Uyghur people. Well, I was wrong. I said 2 million Uyghur people would be killed. 3 million have been killed. What has the United Nations done about it? Nothing. And now the people being locked up in high rises, I also pointed out that they were welded in, they were bolted in, and now we see that that is true. People not only were jumping from their balconies, but they're trying to burn down the building so that they'll open the building so that the fire department can come in. Nope, they just let it burn. So basically, China is showing us where we're headed. And here's the deal. China, well, let's not get off the subject of the UN for a second. So essentially, the World Health Organization took over the world in the last 3 years. One man, Tedros, controls the opinion of the National Institutes of Health and the Center for Disease Control and Prevention. Notice they never add prevention because they've never prevented anything that was bad or that would cause illness.
It sounds great. Come on, Douglas.
It's a lovely
science
thing.
Is real.
But they dropped the P because somebody might say, well, when did you ever do any prevention? But anyway, they admit right now in their VAERS 11 million permanently damaged people in America. Okay, so what are you going to do with that? How is it that we gave our constitutional rights over to the United Nations World Health Organization. And now Biden has signed illegally a contract to make it even more 100% complete control of America. And so now they're stating, I love this one, that we're going to have to wear those diapers again over our mouth because of climate change. Now, that's completely insane. But also notice that the 10 or more substations for electricity in Oregon and Florida and Washington have been attacked. And what does the major media say? They say they know who did it. Of course you know who did it. Conservatives, probably MAGA people, who are doing it because they're mad. This is their narrative. They're doing it, these conservatives, blowing up their own electricity, going without power because they're mad that transsexuals are reading nasty books to their children in school. That's how stupid it gets. And
Right.
so
Okay, so we got on this subject by talking about dealing with this demon. We have all these symptoms that more and more people are aware of. So how do we deal with this demon is the question on the table.
Very simply, we deflate the demon's big bubble. We simply stop all offshore accounts. We stop people in hedge funds. Well, first off, we
But
stop.
who's the we? The we are all compromised by the Babylonian Radanites.
I'm telling you the antidote. I'm not saying it can be done.
Oh, well, what can be done?
Prayer,
Prayer,
love,
Jesus Christ.
preparing yourself for what is about to happen and is happening. And you've already seen it in the last 2.5, 3 years. When you see,
Did you see that announcement today of the rapid decline in the sperm counts of men worldwide?
and they knew that, and that it was targeted. There's actually nano tubes with medicines in them that attack the genitalia of men and women. And this is the reason for many of those kind of symptoms. But let's just look at this. If the World Health Organization gets all these countries who are member countries, and they voted on it, and America tried to pass it through in a sneaky way some months ago, and that's when we wrote the article. That's when Biden wrote his executive order, and that's when they prepared to say, no, it's going to be 100 times worse than the last 2.5 years. It will be a total nightmare. Why? Because they know they only have a few years, not for climate change causing carbon dioxide to kill the world, which is so stupid. The world only exists because of carbon dioxide. I mean, it's
We'll
absolutely
just be
absurd.
greener. If we have more carbon dioxide, they'll have more plants,
Correct.
which will produce more oxygen.
And so is that why all the elites head on out to Antarctica? Because they know when the Earth shifts, Antarctica actually becomes on the equator.
Yes, and we now know that because of research just recently in the last 2 weeks, where in Greenland, at the Arctic, the very northern tip of Greenland, they found now DNA for basically a plethora of all kinds of animals, from mammoths to rodents to everything. Everything was there in full bloom and wonderful, and then boom, it was covered with ice. Well, this is well known. Mammoths have been discovered in ice, eating green vegetation in their mouth in Antarctic, in the Arctic, in Michigan, and any place where there was giant walls of ice moving. In the last time that we had a Maunder minimum, we're back to another Maunder minimum, folks. We're supposed to be entering into an ice age. It isn't going to be global warming. It's going to be the exact opposite. But hey, don't worry about that, because it doesn't matter. If there's going to be massive walls of ice, then it isn't going to create oceans rising. It will, if the evaporation from the ocean and the snow from that then creates all of this ice.
No, ice expands water molecules, and so if it melts, it's less water. The mass goes down. So the idea that you've got melting ice caps that then raise the water.
Mike, trust the science.
Oh yeah, okay.
It's settled science.
I know. I have actually shown people that, proved that with a glass of water and ice. And I said, watch that surface go down, and it does. And they still don't believe it.
The very island that they do the measurement for the climate change is an uninhabited island in the Hawaiian chain. It's uninhabited, so nobody can actually go there and do any measurements. But the measurements, they admitted 2 years ago, the ocean has gone down 1/4 of an inch. And now what do they say? Oh, no, we don't care about the ocean rising. We don't care about the fact that there's more snow and more ice in the Antarctic and the Arctic than there ever has been in human history. We're now going to go with ocean temperature. The ocean temperature is going to change 1.5 degrees, and that's going to end humanity. No, it changes all the time. And the ocean currents themselves change. And if they don't add,
And it's all based on the sun.
it's all
And
has to be based
nothing
on the
we
sun.
can do anything about.
But the point is, they ignore the sun.
Oh wait, I think Brennan thinks he can. He's going to spray so much stuff in the sky that will reflect the light from the sun, and therefore man will be able to manage it. I wonder how that's going to work out for us.
About 2 months ago, the White House had said and made a public announcement with their person in a press conference that the White House now has as one of its major goals to block out the sunlight. That's how stupid we've become, okay? So they will ignore the sun, but they will take coal ash since the 60s and all of the nanoparticles that kill humans and spray it. Some of them rise up into the atmosphere, the ionosphere, and create it all ionized, and then they can use HARP and other electromagnetic frequency emanations to manipulate the temperatures of our atmosphere, which then, of course, controls whether or not we block out ultraviolet rays, which kill us if we don't block them out. So we're destroying the ozone. That stops ultraviolet.
So here's my prayer. My prayer is the angel of death will pass over our house.
Oh, yeah. And we've been putting our sigils on top of the power station images on maps and things like that, because it's the power of prayer. And for our group, that sigil is representative of increasing a vibration in an area. But when you talk about taking out the sun, I mean, isn't that what a demon would do? The demon does not want to have the light of the sun, because that means life. He doesn't want to have the light of Christ. He doesn't want the sun, S-O-N. So all of it has to be extinguished, including carbon, because that's what brings life. So literally, the demon is trying to suffocate humanity out of existence.
True. And that being is called Sorot or Soroth. He's the sun demon. He's the Antichrist. He's the opposite of Christ. Christ raised down warmth, light, sound, and life to human beings from the sun. Christ is in the Trinity, but he works out of the sun in the physical world. And now Christ is, of course, encircling the earth with an etheric realm that is trying to sustain the life of the earth so that human beings can finish their proper development. But
Douglas, wait a minute. That you have named the demon now. We are saying that the demon is Sorat.
And he tries to eat the human I am, the human ego. And he already has his agents down here, and they're called asuras. So every time that you're working on your laptop or your phone and you're in a dark room, the asuras are eating your eyes and making you blind. This is a scientific fact. We've presented you with intelligence reports that give you the science for this. But yes, these devices are killing humanity's existence to even reincarnate. If Sorot gets his way, he will make sure that humans go to a cold, dead, and lifeless grave.
By the way, that information about the sperm count drop was largely attributed to the wireless radiation coming from the phones that are carried many times by men in the pockets, which is near your genitals.
So what does Steiner say? Yeah, I know you love that phrase, Mike. Steiner says. What does Steiner say about how we take hold of Sorot?
We don't. We simply let him die because of the lack of human interest in these things. And what we do is we focus on the second coming of Christ, which is happening in the etheric realm around the earth. If a human being is clairvoyant, or they're developing these intellectual clairvoyant capacities, they can look beyond their tamed astral body, the astral light, into the etheric, and there receive their sustenance directly from the etheric Christ, who is in his second coming now. Unfortunately, his second coming is also a second crucifixion. So all the people who are materialists who believe in this stuff, they are literally crucifying Christ again. They're crucifying the etheric world. They're crucifying life and they're basically becoming unwittingly worshippers of Sorot, because Sorot's not down here yet. But his asuras are eating people left and right, and Ahriman, the being who we call Satan, the being of materialism, who gives us only gray shadow thoughts instead of living thoughts, he is in control right now. And unfortunately, we will not defeat him. The earth will have to be left behind as we rise into a new sphere, according to Rudolf Steiner. But that's the way that you do it. And that can only be done as an individual. Collectively, all these collectives, these subgroups of the Pilgrim Society, why do they cluster together? Because they know that they're evil. They know that they themselves have been subsumed, obsessed, and possessed by these demons. And because you cannot satiate any desire ever, then you can't stop lust. You can't stop greed.
One of the things that in the few times I've met some of these people, one of the things I've come away with every time is this sense that these are extremely arrogant people who have no interest in you as a person. They're out to see what they can suck out of you.
Absolutely. One other example can highlight this, and that's that there's a group in London that controls all the gold. What is it? The London Gold
Metals Exchange.
Metals Exchange, yes.
That's Michael Farmer.
Exactly.
Candace Owens' father-in-law.
So what happened recently? Oh, within the last 6 months, we got to see the following. We got to see China say, oh, we're going to have a gold-backed renminbi, which is their currency, or others would say yuan. And then we get to hear now, just 2 days ago, Vlad the Impaler Putin say that he is going to create a gold-backed digital currency. Okay? That's not possible. So if you believe these lies, you're simply naive. Why is that not possible? Because the world exchange in currency is usually around oil and natural gas and commodities in manufacturing and things like that. Well, there isn't enough gold in the world. That's why we're not on a gold standard to even back up the American currency, though we have out there essentially a debt of $100 trillion in derivatives. Those are bet every single day. So of the $100 trillion, every single day, there are gains and losses from that by the people who are doing that. And those are bankers. Those are the giant stock market corporations. Those are the individual corporations and billionaires. So what are they actually saying? They're telling us that there's going to be a gold-backed currency, and that the battle right now is whether it will be BRICS that will have the gold-backed currency, China, Russia, America. We're going to go to a U.S., and I want to make this perfectly clear, United States Federal Reserve central bank currency. It will not be American money. The U.S. Federal Reserve is not American. They are crown agents.
Correct.
The central banks are not American. They are agents of the Federal Reserve. And if we're going to have a digital currency that's going to collapse all of our credit cards and all of our banking into one unit, that will simply make it easier to be controlled by the City of London. But what did they do? And this is the part that just shows you how stupid they think we are and how stupid they are and their lack of imagination. Okay, so Britain all of a sudden one day says, yeehaw, we just found in Ghana the place that has only ever in its whole history, and one of the largest places for gold discoveries in the world, they have found 8 tons of gold there.
Oh, I haven't heard that one.
Oh, that's how many they produced in all of history. But now Ghana says that they have found millions of tons. Okay, that's more than all the gold in the world. We have 8,000 tons and we have the most. Everyone else is far below that. So if you come up with in Ghana, and so now I went back to check it today because I wanted the number that they now give. They won't give a total number. You want to know why? Because first off, it's not only fake. Now they're giving 230 million ounces in 2 weeks is what they say. They pulled up out of the ground. Now, that's impossible. That's not, you couldn't refine that much in that period of time. And who owns it?
Douglas, come on, you're using your brain.
I know.
Yeah, what is your problem?
And I know Tyler's not going to like me saying this, but I saw a nice meme the other day that shows a person holding duct tape and says, duct tape can't fix this, but it can muffle it. See, it's funny, Tyler. You need to put
Oh,
that.
it's so stupid.
Yeah, well,
But
I
here's the
like it.
thing. But they have to, because if they're going to crash everything, they're going to say that they found all that gold so that they can back their fake currency or digits to gold, but it doesn't
Yeah.
really exist. Honestly, these people
Well,
really think we're stupid out here.
and
Well,
the thing is, this is the ultimate battle right now. And let me finish this. Who owns the gold? 10% of it goes to the Ghana people. And they said, well, you're
that's
not going to
nice.
rip us off this time. We're going to get 10%. And before we do anything, we're going to take a whole bunch of gold and put it in our own gold reserves. Well, that
Whoops.
shows you just how fake it is. They took the real gold. Who is digging up the gold? Oh, that is a British company called
BHP. Which one?
Goldfields and I Am Gold.
Oh, there you go.
Now, what happened? Oh, 2 weeks after they discovered this, which is all done by Gold Assays, they simply dig up a little, and they go to a great deal of trouble to tell you this vein. Oh, this vein goes down this far, and it's this big, and it pulls out this much percentage gold from this one. Blah, blah. All lies, all lies. And so when the world found out that they were going to claim that they found more gold in Ghana than all the gold in the whole history of the world all combined, China, 2 weeks later, oh, Lordy, they in Uganda found, I have to read it because it's unbelievable.
I know where this is going. This is so funny. It's going to be gold wars between all the countries.
It already is.
I know, but how about the
It's
gold
fake
at the
gold.
the gold at the end of Switzerland's airport? When will they?
Well,
When will
I've
they
seen
say
that
gold?
out.
I've been telling everyone that will be pulled out during the reset, and that will establish the new prices of gold. As we know, the City of London determines the spot price of gold, silver, and LIBOR rates. And so they've been controlling it through the Rothschild office. This isn't a conspiracy for
Right.
decades and decades. So what happened? China said they bought a dead gold mine in Uganda, which had already been tapped out forever, and they never really came up with that much gold anyway. And they found, hang on to your hats, folks, especially you, Mike, you got a big hat, 31 million tons of gold.
Wow. That is just
Well, wait.
31
awesome.
million tons of gold. That's impossible.
Mike, see if the miners can find any gold down there, okay? And then we'll come up with a leader crypto coin
I
that's
think
based upon gold, leader gold.
I think they took a vacation there last week and they didn't find anything.
You guys dig so deep, you come out in China and you didn't find no gold. So
Yeah.
here's the deal, and Africa. So here's the deal. The second that China came out and said that they found 31, I have to keep reading it because it's impossible. I had to check this 10 times this morning because they've raised the amount, by the way. And why have they raised the amount? Because the British in Ghana are saying they found what is an infinite amount of gold. And they are, basically infinite. They had first said it was like, 10 million tons or something. And you're going, that's not possible. That's got to be
I have a question,
misquote.
Douglas. Who issued that press release?
These were all British.
I know, but do you have on your paper, do you have the press release? Who issued the press? It was probably either Reuters or AP or Financial Times.
It was Reuters, and
there you go.
Oh, but they questioned
Just all lies.
officials in Ghana and officials in Uganda. So they got the straight scoop from the people there on the ground, the real Africans.
You mean
these
these African warlords who probably never did an ounce of work in their life?
Yeah, but
Correct.
the next thing will be, because these countries can't be outdone. So the next country is going to say that they have found a meteor and they're going to go up there and mine the gold in the meteor
in Antarctica
or the dark side of the moon.
Oh, don't get me started.
Hey, we know where these things go.
China just released a film that supposedly, it said in the headline, proves that they're they're landing on the dark side of the moon, where they built a greenhouse that is just successfully growing everything. It's just doing great. Oh, in the dark.
In the dark. Yeah,
in
there
the
we go.
dark.
In the
And,
dark.
and so they just released, and this is just so beautiful, they just released pictures of the whole moon, and because they have supposedly a satellite going around the moon and showing all these pictures, but they couldn't show anything, of course, where they actually say, oh, sometimes it gets light. Well, then the science is all wrong. But anyway, the Chinese fake everything. So when they heard the Brits got a bunch of gold in Ghana, they made up their own gold mine in Uganda so that they can do what? Because they draw paper notes on the gold in
Shell
the ground.
companies in London
It's all
borrow
fake.
money, send out to those people who then feed it back to all their buddies. And there's either just a smattering of gold that they put in there from the Zurich vaults, or there's no gold at all.
Here's what's going to happen. China's going to say that they're going to get, by the way, the Chinese gold, low estimates from what they say they found, and they're digging it up really fast, even though they're only giving out paper notes on gold. They're not selling any physical gold. $12.8 trillion worth of gold. Okay. What is China going to do with that $12.8 trillion? They're going to write fractional notes to Russia, and that's how they're going to pay them off for their $90 billion a year in oil that they now have, that they've taken the oil from Europe and from America and other places. And now China just bought it wholesale. Any oil you have, any natural gas you have, Mr. Vlad the Impaler, China will buy. So they just paid $90 billion, one payment to Vlad, so that Vlad could continue his war. Well, they're going to loan out that $12.8 trillion in gold in paper to Putin, and that's going to be how he supposedly comes up with a gold-backed digital currency that will cover oil exchanges.
So they're going to lease Chinese gold, is what you're saying.
They're going to lease Chinese fake gold, yes.
Imaginary gold.
Imaginary gold.
Release imaginary gold. So I'm telling you, we could do this scheme right there in the mines, and we would probably get a better run at it than they would.
That's
Yeah,
how
well,
Bush
here's our
became a
problem.
billionaire. Bush
Here's
became
our
a billionaire with Barrick Gold, which was a dead gold mine, 2 dead gold
I am
mines.
going to test your DNA, because if you're not a Babylonian Rhodonite, it ain't going to work.
That will be what they're going to have to come to. But as we have now pointed out, the Rhodonite Babylonians, who are the fake Jews who are basically persecuting the name of the Hebrews,
Right.
they are 70 to 80% Iranian.
That's
That's
right.
called Indo-Aryan.
That's from the DNA.
They're
Yes.
Indo-Aryan. So
Oh,
basically,
no, this is a really interesting point you made today. I've heard you say it before, but it finally made sense. So say that again. You're saying these Babylonian Rhodonites are basically genetically Indo-Aryan, which on the haplograph study that I've seen says Persian. It doesn't say Indo-Aryan. So what's the difference between those two?
Aryans are made up. But the point is, that's what the Nazis used, and that's what even the Kaiser Wilhelm used to say that they were the master race. They were the Aryans. Well, there's no Aryans. And not only that, they're the worst enemy to Semites, and supposedly Hebrews are Semites. So the myth of the Aryan-Semite war and hatred is completely nonsense. The people who are now claiming to be Jews in this day and age, who are Rhodonite Babylonians, are actually 70 to 80% Persian, which is
Indo-Aryan. So what are you saying there? Are you saying that the Germans claiming to be the Aryan race were these Babylonian Rhodonites making their move? And if so, these Jews that went to the camps, were they more Babylonian Rhodonites, or were they Hebrews, or why did they turn? It sounds like they turned on their own.
They didn't turn on the Jewish bankers, which is what they said they were turning on, and that's the reason they put all those.
Now, when you say that, you say Jewish, but you really mean
Not
Babylonian
Jewish.
Rhodonite.
Correct. The
Okay.
fake Jewish German bankers. But remember, it was also Union Bank, Brown Brothers, and a lot of British banks that actually supported Hitler. And they knew it full well because the Brits are Germans.
And American banks.
Yes, well, that was the Prescott Bush, the whole
J.P.
Bush
Morgan, Prescott
dynasty.
Bush, Warburg, Rockefeller,
I think the most
Carnegie.
insightful thing that I've learned from some of your conversations this week is it just was this aha. I couldn't understand why Andrew, what's his name, Burla, CEO of Pfizer,
Albert Bourla.
Albert Bourla, and his ilk were pushing the vaccines on the people of Israel. And I
Yes,
couldn't get my head around that because I thought he was of a Hebrew faith.
he's
Why would he
Ashkenazi.
do this? Well, he's a Babylonian Radhanite, and of course he want to get rid of the remaining Jewish Hebrew people.
Well, they have to cover their tracks. The narrative
Yes.
has to be that the Israelites and the people who move back there are not necessarily in any way Hebrews or Israelites, that they are still being persecuted and that they must be there because they're the only foothold we have in this mostly Muslim world. But it is inconsequential because we don't need their oil anymore. So the British petroleum and Dutch Shell in Iran has now gone back to having contracts with Iran that is promising to blow up Israel the second they have a nuclear weapon to do so. And what's happened in Iraq, well, that was the American ripoff of Iraq. Now, over years, the American
Well,
holdings dwindled.
you say that about Iraq, but when we actually look, remember that we were all glued to our TV the night of the shock and awe bombing of Babylon, Baghdad, and I always thought, what is it? Why are we bombing a bunch of people in a sand dune? And with all this discovery of the Babylonian Radhanites, and we found in the mid 1800s a concerted British effort to destroy antiquities in and around Baghdad. And that's in essence what George H.W. Bush was doing in Baghdad, was continuing to destroy evidence. And now we're seeing that there is plenty of evidence, even now, even after that, of the Babylonian Radhanites that's just now coming out. So it seems like their 4,000-year-old secret is finally coming to light.
Absolutely.
Wait. And if the ADL were true to its word that it's there to protect Jewish people from bad narratives, then why are they not outing the Babylonian Radhanites, who is the enemy of what they called the Jewish Hebrew people?
They
The
are
AD
Babylonian Radhanites.
Correct.
Well, that's the answer. But what people need to start doing with the ADL is stop labeling or pointing to Jews
Yeah.
or Ashkenazi Jews. Point to the Babylonian Radhanites. And if you are threatened by the ADL, say, look, I'm trying to protect the Jewish faith and people and the integrity of that.
True.
We are pro-Hebrew, which means we're pro-Samaritan because they're about 8% Hebrew, and pro-Ethiopian because they're about 9%. And so we are actually all for the Hebrews, no problem. But when you took the Hebrews and you turned them into an invasion force of Radhanites, that's what we're against. And so
all across the Silk Road, all throughout Babylon for the last 4,000 years, it's just unbelievable.
And they are the Pilgrim Society. You can't get any more higher percent Radhanite Babylonian than the Pilgrims, and especially Cecil Rhodes and his group of Rothschild, the wealthiest men on the earth at the time. 4 of them got together. They set out a plan, a 200-year plan to take over the world, and by golly, they're right on target.
With
the
full cooperation of Queen Victoria and the future King Edward.
Absolutely. And now remember, Fat Fingers Chucky is the #1 person for the World Economic Forum. And why? Because he's a German and he's a fascist, just like all of his German lineage that took over Britain. And it's nothing new. That's why the World Economic Forum is led by an open Nazi. That's why Zelensky is a party of the regents, which are Nazis.
Yep.
And Putin wasn't kidding when he said, I'm fighting the Nazis, the fascist Nazis. He absolutely is.
Yes. And now Bibi Netanyahu wants to make the Ukraine greater Israel.
Absolutely.
And so that the things we've discovered have
Greater
finally
Israel,
started.
but not for the Hebrew people. Greater Israel for the Babylonian Radhanites.
Right. They're
Well,
going to
I
kill
just
off
like
all
to
the
clarify
Israelis.
that because we're throwing out a lot of new terms for people.
True.
But anyway, this is the state of the world now, where there's no logic, there's no truth, and any of the leaders are in fact not, they're leading us into demon possession. They're leading us into the demons of mammon. So I mentioned
Right.
gold because gold is the number one tool of those who worship mammon, money. And the Rodnite Babylonians are absolutely the best worshipers of mammon on the
Can I
face of the
bring
earth.
up that in all those contracts we've looked at over the last 4,000 years, I would say silver was as prominent in those contracts as was gold.
And it was up until our time, and now it's being used for derivative betting. $100 trillion. A majority of it is based on the bets over silver, and because they manipulate silver twice a year. And as long as you know what it's going to go up to or go down to, then you can make your bet and you can win. And that's what it's all based on. Mammon. When you're talking about betting, you are talking about the worst demonic aspect of mammon. So there is hope, folks. The hope is you and your own relationship to the spiritual world is more powerful than any demon on the earth, more powerful than this 4,000-year-old institution or the 2,000-year-old institution of the Vatican or the institutions in Britain.
You said something in your interview with John Barnwell, which I thought was real significant, in that in dealing with demons, and I remember this from various scriptures where Jesus would say, "Get thee behind me, Satan." He didn't destroy Satan. He told him to get behind him, and then that took away that demon's power.
Precisely. We all have that power, and we all need to exercise it.